Today, we're going to be looking at Rapid Strike Toolbox. I think it's slowly getting into a slightly better metagame position as this format has come on. It did really, really well in early online tournaments, started to gain a little bit of traction and hype, but then really didn't perform too well in the first couple tournaments. It did get a top 16 placement at the EUIC with a pretty creative list, and it's actually the exact same 60 I'm bringing to you today. But I do think that the sort of hype died down post EUIC because Duraludon won the tournaments and was very prevalent in Lugia builds. Now, it seems to me that most Lugias are moving towards Urshifu, the single striker themselves, just because it gives them slightly better type coverage and just higher damage output potential, and it takes up less space because they don't need as many impact energies in their deck. They can just play a higher earn count. So it just seems to be a better fit in Lugia. Plus, it looks like most Arc builds are going towards Giratina now, thanks to, again, some recent regional tournament results. So it looks like you're getting into a slightly better matchup into Lugia and Arceus than you have been over the last couple of weeks. And we know this is a really good deck at preying on the Lost Zone engine. That's kind of the biggest selling point of the Rapid Strike Toolbox. So I do think it's sneakily quite a good week to take a punt on this deck. Yes, you still need to dodge and weave some matchups, that's for certain. And yes, we're a bit of a consistency tightrope where it's definitely not the most consistent deck in the world. But there are some major selling points here, and the format is slowly going more favourably towards this deck. So let's talk a little bit about how we try and gain advantages and how this deck ticks. It mostly tries to throw damage counters around the board with a combination of Double Gunner from Inteleon, discarding a water energy to put 2 counters on 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Then we can play around with those damage counters with our Radiant Alakazam, and ideally we're setting up lower hit point Pokemon so that we can use a Yoga Loop attack on them to knock them out and give us an additional turn, which is absolutely bonkers. Yoga Loop is a really great effect. It allows us to then continue onwards with another Rapid Strike Search, another Double Gunner, another Painful Spoon, and it gives us all sorts of ways to just manipulate the opponent's board to take crucial knockouts where we want to. One of the crucial knockouts is going to be on Manaphy's, so that we can enable the G-Max Rapid Flow attack, dealing 120 to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon. That's why you're not seeing any Boss's Orders or Serena in the deck. We're looking to only really capitalize on our opponent's bench via our sniping attacks, and we can do this pretty confidently, knowing that even if Manaphy's are coming into play, that actually kind of helps us a little bit because of how easy it is for us to gunner down the Manaphy, and then we can still get our rapid flows in. So that's definitely the main sort of takeaway of the deck. We're trying to get lots of spread damage in, trying to rinse and repeat our Double Gunner when we can. That's why you're seeing energy retrievals in here and Clara, as well as the 6 water energy. We also have water energy which can work with Melanie, so we can power up an Urshifu all in one turn. And these two cards have pretty good inter-synergy as well, where the Inteleon's weak to Lightning, but we're already playing Fighting-type Pokemon in the deck, and Urshifu is weak to Psychic, which is very bad against Guardy, of course, but we can just sort of use Inteleon throughout the opening stages with G-Max Spiral, and then just keep the Urshifu as a regular V, as a threat on the bench, knowing that if ever we do have the time to strike with a Melanie attached play, we can evolve into our VMAX and make sure we get value, knocking out, multiple Curliers or whatnot, if ever that comes to fruition. But also, with this big weakness to Psychic, we are playing a couple Drapion in the deck. This is our way around Mew. And surprisingly, we actually have a really good time into Mew just by playing these two Drapions. And that's because Path Roxanne is really quite ineffective against this deck because we have Octillery, which can tutor our Stadium Bounce in Tower of Waters, being a Rapid Strike card. So you literally just need to search out double Drapion, and you should be pretty good from there, to be honest with you. Yes, they can do some Yoga Loop shenanigans against you, but you're going to try and at least develop your Inteleon part of the deck and put some pressure on them that way. So you should be pretty okay there. We're also playing the V-Star in the deck. This was an innovation from the EUIC, and the Hazard Star is the reason for it being in here. It can paralyze and poison the opponent's active and puts 3 counters on the Pokemon instead of 1 between turns. This is really just trying to capitalize on decks that have fewer switch cards in the deck, and I think this is predominantly going to be important against Lugia, which is kind of one of our more difficult matchups. So trying to buy a turn out of them with that Hazard Star is pretty important. Now, for most other matchups, it's going to be Forest Seal Stone just for that extra consistency boost, which is pretty important for a combo-reliant deck, which is ultimately trying to fill the board with multiple Stage 1 Pokemon, get lots of energies, and, you know, tutor out all sorts of other bits and bobs throughout the deck. So, bit of an unconventional engine, is a little bit reliant on Professor's research and just sort of that lucky dip of what you see from the 7 cards. You have Octillery to try and stitch it all together, really. And there are a lot of interesting and creative plays. So I hope you enjoy the games, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. Alright, getting into it then. We are going second. Pretty decent hand to be going second with, to be honest with you. A little bit painful to get rid of some of our VMAXs, but we do play multiple copies of them. And looks like we're up against an Arceus deck. That's definitely one of the upticks, the uptrends recently that we're trying to pounce on, right? Hitting a crucial weakness with Urshifu. And trying to have an easy prize map. Just by them being a, you know, predominantly 2-prize deck. And we can punish the single prizes quite easily with either Medicham or Urshi spread plays. Picking up the Forest Seal Stone is pretty pog here. It means I can hold the research in all of these stage 2s, stage 1s for next turn, and instead just fill up the board with as many basics as possible. I think it's better than just taking an Octillery here. That might incentivize a judge from the opponent, and they're probably going to want to look to judge anyway, right? That's normally the prerogative of an Arceus player, so happy enough to sit on this hand, but also know full well that this could also be completely irrelevant as it comes back to our turn and we get judged. So we'll see how our opponent's turn is looking. They've got the V-Guard Energy on, which is actually one of the only defenses this deck can have against Urshifu, because we hit the clean 300, and then the V-Guard Energy puts us down to 270, so they actually hang on with the V-Guard Energy. That's literally one of the main things they can do to try and stay out of range. And the opponent does judge us into a pretty awkward hand if they are able to path here. If they don't path, I think we're still pretty okay. Even if we are pathed, I could Ultra Ball for Octillery and go Karina's Focus if I have to. As the opponent is Star Birthing. I imagine they probably need to find DTE in a basic. Yeah, it's just going to be the Tina. So we're going to tank with our Intel in the active, and here comes the Tina V. We rip Research off the top, which is going to make our turn even cleaner here. I can instantly grab Octillery, hold that, and just fill up our board with an extra Pokemon here. I'm debating the Alakazam versus the Inteleon. I have prized a VMAX, so I think I will eventually go for the Alakazam here. I'm already aware that I'm going to be hitting 270 this turn and not getting the knockout, so we are fortunate enough to research into our tower, and I can also Octillery now just to grab that next VMAX. Obviously Urshifu is going to be doing the heavy lifting in this matchup. I can also plant an extra energy down. I can throw away the next Forest Seal Stone, because I never want to get judged back into that card. And we will just Gale Thrust for the 270. Now, the opponent can play Sharon's Care, but I don't know if they're really in a position to actually play a Sharon's here, because it's so difficult for them to sort of chain their Giratina attacks over time. So I think I should be pretty safe, to be honest, in finishing off this Arceus anyway, over a couple turns. I think overcoming things like Path are my next issues, because our hand is actually pretty bad now. Interestingly, they play Lost City and bounce our tower that way. And they will develop their next Giratina. You can see the Ultra Ball now as well, getting rid of Squovert and Research. We do see the Tina V-Star coming into play, and just the Trinity Nova, trying to set up that 2 shots on the Urshifu and powering up the next Tina a little bit. So the retrieval's not too helpful either here. We can take the Karina's Focus to hand to try and draw towards water energy. I have Rope, so if I find VMAX plus water, I have a really good way of finishing off their Arceus, but I completely air the 3 cards from the Karina's Focus, or the 4 cards. So I will just have to settle for a Gale Thrust here. That is one of the issues of this deck. Sometimes you do have those turns of not much draw, whether it's Melanie or Karina's Focus. And sometimes you can just have that exponential potential, but just never really see it through, and end up just having to take that one little prize that doesn't really change our prize map too much, because I could have just sniped that later on with a rapid flow or something. So basically given our opponent a free turn here because our draw wasn't really up to it. But at least we're holding on to Stadium Bounce and Research for next turn. So that's looking pretty good. We do get roped, and I want to force the V-Star into the active. Don't give them any free shred plays or any hits with their Arceus itself. So this forces the Tina V-Star to start throwing some energies into the Lost Zone, which is at least a little bit helpful for us here. The opponent eventually gets rid of the V-Guard on their Arc. Why not? Seeing as though we have the tower, I'm happy enough to promote this Inteleon, and we actually top deck Water. So Double Gun is going to be pretty nice here. It looks like I am setting up the Medicham play instead, so I'm going to, rather than Double Gun, I'm going to Painful Spoons one off the Arceus and go for the spread onto the Giratina and get to work on that. Because you can see where our prizes are lining up now, right? I'm basically just ignoring this V-Star that's in the active. I'm going to try and finish off Arceus, then do a spread play to finish off the Bibarel and set up the Tina V that's currently on the bench. So really my goal now is just getting as much damage onto that Tina V as possible. I'll be able to take another turn, maybe double dip the Gunner from Inteleon. So looking pretty nice here. We will initiate our second turn. I don't think I can win on the spot next turn, right? So I can get to 5, 6, 7, 190 on the Giratina on the bench. So I can't finish it off. But I can get it into pretty good range here. Just move all the damage off the Bibarel because that's getting knocked out this turn. I have Melanie as well, so I can Melanie to the active. I'm sat on Melanie for next turn now as well. So I can go for a Rapid Flow knowing that if our opponent hand disrupts us, I can just Octillery for the Rapid Strike energy on the bench Urshifu. If they gust the Urshifu with energy, I have my next Melanie in hand for another Rapid Flow play next turn. So I'm set in sort of both departments, which is pretty nice. I even have the Horn in hand plus Water energy, so I could do some Double Gunner Spoon stuff if the opponent doesn't evolve their V-Star here. So it looks like we've got a pretty nice buffer. We'll see what the opponent does. It has to be a pretty meteoric hand disrupt at this point for us to be in trouble. See the energy onto the benched V. And the opponent definitely taking their time on possibly debating which supporter to play. It is eventually a boss's orders. It is going to bring up the Urshifu. Like I said, because we Melanied into Melanie, I didn't have to commit a turn attachment last turn anywhere, so I can just bring the Urshi back up and go Melanie attach Rapid Flow, or I can do Echoing Horn, Spoon, Double Gunner stuff, because they didn't evolve up. So there we go. Bring the Squovit back, everyone's favourite, and we'll knock out the Tina that way. So I didn't even need to attack to close out the game there. That should be one of the matchups we're trying to come up against quite a lot, and one of the main reasons why I feel like it's a decent time to be playing this deck, to be fair. Let's get into our next game. It would have been a really awesome hand if we could have kept it, but having to throw that back into the mix. And pretty decent hand still here. We have Remoraid double Nest Ball, so can't be too upset with that one. And the opponent is playing Lost Box, by the looks of things. Bit of Kyogre action. So pretty much everything's useful against Lost Box. The Octillery is obviously huge, the Alakazam, the Inteleon itself. Because I led the Remoraid, I feel like I want to get a second Remoraid developed just in case the opponent gets an early Cram knockout. Maybe playing a little bit passive and safe there. But Octillery is such a big part of the deck that you'll end up finding that you whiff off Research way too often if you don't have an Octillery to back you up throughout the game, so I prefer getting the second one developed quickly just to be safe. Because this should be one of our sort of bread and butter matchups, right? We really should be pretty favoured here into Lost Box. The entire intention of the deck is trying to prey on lower hit point Pokemon, and the opponent literally has to put a ton of them into play for us. So It should mean good things for us as the opponent gets the VIPs rolling. They have developed Manaphy, but their board is now trapped with their main attacker just looking like Greninja. I can go for a double gunner. I actually think I should have roped first here. Yeah, I should have roped first, because now the opponent can give me damaged Comfey. If I don't find Alakazam, I've wasted damage. So yeah, that's actually a mistake, because I imagine I'm going into the Intel here. Yeah, and just researching. So I definitely should have just played the rope first. And then I would have preferred to have damage on a benched guy here. I have the option of going for that Alakazam to fix my mistake, but I'm just going to grab the Octillery instead and just make more Inteleons. I think that's a smarter move. So we'll have to live with our mistake. We'll just pretend the opponent got a Switch Cart activation. Yeah, definitely important to sort of map out your turn when you have these double gunners. They can only access the bench, of course. You have a ton of bench access. Even when there are Manaphy's in play, sometimes you can work Manaphy's hit points down to a range where you can knock it out mid-turn and then still get an Urshifu play off. So there is a lot to juggle resource-wise in the deck. I'm no expert in it. As our opponent is going to be selecting their way through the game here. Not too sure what really threatens us. I mean, a Raikou, I suppose, is one of the best attackers they could have here, because I am lightning weak. But looks like it's going to be Cram Escape Rope, so I can just send up the Remoraid. I'm sure the opponent would be going after that anyway at some point with Sableye. But it looks like the opponent goes for Boss instead and tries to take out the Octillery. Pick up the Melanie, which is actually kind of intriguing. Trying to get this Urshifu into the mix whilst I turn attached to Inteleon. Have a lot of Water Energy in hand, and honestly, Water Energy is so hard to come by, and they're so important in the deck that I like just holding on to Water for next turn as well. I think this is definitely the right way about going about my turn. As I actually Melanie into Octillery, which then gets me my next double gunner. So I've got a really well set up board here. I'm getting a very heavily damaged Manaphy. I'm spreading the counters around a little bit. I can actually take out the Manaphy this turn by the looks of things. Force them into a position to play Clara, which is a place they really don't want to be in. Otherwise, I'm threatening that Urshifu. And already I'm down to 3 prize cards. And I've already got Spoons and Inteleons around. I have the option to go Medicham next turn. I have so many ways to take a 3 prize turn next turn. It's actually disgusting. Like, if Urshifu's not dealt with, I don't know how I really lose this game, to be honest. And with their finisher being Kyogre-based, I don't think I have to worry. They still have 24 cards in their deck. I don't think that's going to be an issue for us. They can't really play Raikou at this point because it's weak to fighting. So even if they had the response on the Inteleon, it's a turn too late because I could just Rapid Flow that plus one of their lower hit point Pokemon. So I really don't know what attack they can conjure up here that's that relevant. Looks like they're gating to a Snorlax, but it feels like the game's like already past them. Essentially, if you set up as the Intel like Rapid Box player, I think you shouldn't have much trouble against these Lost Box builds. I think possibly Sky Seal Stone would be the one that you're most afraid of, and maybe Turbo just forces you to at least draw pretty well in the opening, but in this case, I have so many avenues to win the game. I can tutor out Medicham here, by the looks of things. If I'm going just for the extra turn option, we can gunner down some Comfey. I can get my energy attachment into the Medicham, so I'm just researching to hit energy here. And it looks like we hit the retrieval, so we can get a next gun in. That's going to put them both down to 30 left, so I can spoon over one off the Greninja onto a Comfey, and then I can just use the Medicham to take the extra turn. And, well, yeah, there's no Manaphy developed, so I can simply come in with Gmax Rapid Flow to close out the game. So it looks pretty good there. And that's also a reason why, like, Manaphy is really not an issue for this deck, because you prey on it anyway so easily. in many ways, it actually helps you by having a 70 hit point Pokemon around for you to just Yoga Loop into. So you can come up with some pretty heroic ways to take multi-prize turn against Lost Box. Let's get into our next game. We're getting to go first here. Again, nest balls are pretty big to hit in the opening stages. Some of my earliest renditions were playing Quad VIP Pass. I kind of get why the build that did well at EUIC was mostly nest ball based, because you still have Irida and you still have Forest Seal Stones, which are just like more versatile cards through the mid game, but still help you get basics into play. But it always feels bad when you really want to get like 5 basics down every turn 1 with this deck. But we were fortunate enough to find some nest balls and get into the game here. We have started Inteleon V, which is a little bit sketchy because it is weak to lightning. So let's see if our opponent can either get to 7 in the Lost Zone, or, as we see, it's Ultra Ball, so it's going to be if they can get some generators going for a Lightning Rondo, and straight away they search out their next Raikou. So definitely going to be part of their priorities here. Looks like we're up against a Flaffy build, which has been doing the rounds recently because it got a cheeky top 8. We will see the Beach Core and the Generator, so a Raikou can come in immediately here and pressurize us. I think a great internal synergy about this deck is that we cover our weakness so nicely. The Inteleon covers Urshifu, and obviously in like matchups like Guardy, you're happy to use your Inteleon a lot anyway, so I think the deck naturally covers its weaknesses quite well. We can actually use the opponent's Beach Court to evolve into VMAX proactively before retreating and evolving into Octillery, so we guarantee the Gale Thrust here for a pretty nice knockout. This is one of the matchups where you really don't need to get too fancy. It's really just about using your Urshifu as effectively as possible, right? They're such efficient attackers, they have such high hit points. In this situation, sure, if you can get some Melanie Rapid Flows, it's going to be even better for you. In theory, you could win in 2 attacks in this matchup with double Rapid Flow. If you knock out like a Mareep and a 2-prizer and a Mareep and a 2-prizer. And it's really down to them to get over this huge hurdle of hit points. The one thing that is potentially scary is that because they got that tempo knockouts, they could be packing the Skyseal Stone. So they actually could just be 2 attacks away from winning the game themselves here, with a 2-shot on our current VMAX. The opponent's getting Raichu into the mix, and they're just going to hit us for 120. Oh, they're not done yet. We have Serena getting rid of Boss. That's 3 of their 4 Gusting cards gone. So I think our priority is to set up our next VMAX and attack with that one, because we don't want to play into that Skyseal Stone if we can help it. Looks like I'm just thinning this Drapion with Ultra Ball, and then I can just take Luminion here. Oh, looks like I'm going for VMAX, and then I'm gonna Octillery for Karina. No, we are changing our mind for Luminion. We're definitely going to win the game in 2 attacks, so I don't see a reason to not use the fish here. And we do get our Stadium Bounce and our energy, so I can now grab Urshifu with Octillery, bring this one into the mix. I have Forest Seal Stone as well, but I don't really feel like I need to use anything else here, so let's just go for the Gale Thrust. Keep the Forest Seal Stone on our chunkiest guy, and hope for the best, essentially. Maybe an argument to put Forest Seal Stone onto Luminion there, rather than have it kind of like in the line of fire, I guess you could say. Because the opponent can reach a knockout here with Raichu, right? In theory. With enough generators. There's already 1 Flaffy in the discard pile, so it's not going to be easy for them to get a Raichu KO. Okay, so they grab Zapdos. So now the only way to beat us is with Skyseal Stone Gust with Raikou. It needs a pretty specific hand here. But okay, they have the Flappy, they have the Beach Court. Oh my god. Oh, it looks like it came down to a Fleet-footed. But rather than having a heart attack, they whiff the They whiffed the lightning, so we're able to get over the line there. That definitely had me sweating in real life when I was when I was playing that game. I was like, "There's no way they had the like 5-card combo in a 5-card hand." Let's get into our next game then. Not ideal having to start Drapion. Drapion is, of course, in here to help the Mew matchup. It also, thanks to having the V-Star in the deck, helps out against Lugia quite a bit. But your board space is really, really important with this deck. You want to have Artillery, you want to have Urshifu options, you want to have Inteleons, you want to have Alakazam, you want the space for Medicham, so... the Drapion really is annoying that it sort of takes up room. But we are up against another Lost Zone variant, so... at least that's good news for us. The opponent's getting pretty well set up, and it turns out it's Giratina. Giratina is definitely one of the more difficult ones you can come up against, right? Because they have their V-Star power that can just get through a V-Max all in one turn. So they can create some pretty intriguing prize maps dealing with Artillery that we basically have to put into play in most situations. And then we have Drapion already in play. I might be forced to use Lumineon this game as well, looking at where our hand's at. So the opponent's going through their turn pretty nicely, right? They've got to conceal, they got to use all 3 flower selectings. And they've developed a couple of attackers, so pretty much everything you need. But our start is really good as well. We have Irida, which can get us VIP pass, which is looking pretty nice. And I already have some Nest Ball in here. So I'm just looking through to see what's what. Definitely going to grab Remoraid. I guess there is an argument for me to Lumineon for research here, but I don't think it's a strong argument, to be honest. I think it's always Irida VIP. We just want so much stuff developed. And looks pretty good to sit on. If I have to use Lumineon next turn, I suppose I will. As the opponent continues to fuel their Lost Zone, they have Chorus. And that was a Forest Seal. Okay, they played multiple Forest Seal Stone in Tina. I think their hand has to be really bad to use the Forest Seal Stone, because I think it's exceptional against VMAXs, but looks like they are using the Forest Seal Stone, which is going to make life way easier for us, actually. But looks like they're doing it to fuel their Lost Zone even further here. Selecting's Chorus, Vacuum. They're getting right up there. They're at 8 in the Lost Zone, so they have opened up Mirage Gates, I suppose. And they are going to switch cut into the Tina and gate to it, so they can initiate this prize race with the 2-prize knockout. But I definitely think... I kind of get the logic of Forest Seal Stone in the deck, but you should really use it sparingly when you're up against the VMAX matchups, right? We're going to lead out with the Intel. I pick up another Intel for turn, which we're going to throw into the bin. I probably should have evolved the active rather than the benched one here before going for research, just in case I didn't really hit much else, but turns out I do still find the VMAX. And I have Tower as well, so if I really want to, I could Gale Thrust for the extra damage. We can also get a cheeky double gunner in. Looks like I am going for the extra damage here. Every damage counter matters in the deck, right? Because you can do so much with it. You can play around with every damage counter, literally, so... Makes sense to come in with the Urshifu. Now that they've used their V-Star power, I can feel pretty confident that this is sticking around. See the Psychic Energy to the Giratina. Some concealing. The opponent's got through their deck quite quickly. Their start was so good. They have 13 cards left in the deck already. See a Rope as well. Let's just bring up a VMAX. Continuing to churn through the deck. For some reason, they could have got healing if they'd chosen the right Confe there. I suppose they have more carts? Or they just went into the wrong one. They could have got some free healing in. Yeah, so it looks like they've missequenced their Confes. A little bit scruffy. But yeah, their Lost Zone is jam-packed. I think it's 14 or 15 cards now. Looks like we have a pretty nice research hand here. We can grab Medicham to take an extra turn. Possibly this turn. But we whiff all water energy from our research, so this turn is getting a lot worse, actually. Yeah, it looks like I probably just have to take a Gale Thrust knockout. Sometimes this deck, honestly, everything is like bags of potential, but then sometimes you just don't hit your energy retrieval or your Forest Hill Stone or your physical water energies, and you end up just having to settle for that, which is a real shame. I thought I had in the bag a Yoga Loop play there with 2 damaged Confes. So yeah, we had to settle for quite a poor turn. But hey, the opponent didn't attack us last turn, so it's all going to be okay. The opponent now will Lost Impacts. They only have 1 card in deck as well. There's a lot going on here. I'm just going to Artillery out Rapid Strike Energy before I get some guns going with Inteleon. We really just want to hit another energy here, right, from the Melanie for 3, and we do. So now I can Yoga Loop this turn, which is looking pretty good. Always nice to get a freebie. We have some good prizes as well. We have Forest Hill Stone, I think, in there, so worth trying to hunt for that. We don't get much help, actually, from our top deck or our prize, so it looks like I'm just going to continue to thin more cards out of the deck here and come in with Urshifu and get the value out of Rapid Flow while I can. Definitely a reason to Gale Thrust here as well, but I think you just have to cash in when it's here, right? I have so much damage scattered around the board. Some debate whether or not I should take the knockout there just to play around random stuff, but I think just keeping more damage around the board looks insane. I'm 1 counter away from dealing with Greninja and Tina, and I'm 3 away from the Confe on the bench, so we're looking in pretty good shape. Even if the opponent can use Sableye next or this turn to finish off our Urshi, don't think it's going to be an issue for us. It opens up board space for Alakazam. So then it's just really down to us. Actually, I have Yoga Loop reset as well, right? So I can get there in a very leisurely fashion, actually. Yeah, the opponent is finishing off our VMAX and plays back over to us, so we can spoon off of Giratina to finish off Greninja. Then I could Yoga Loop it and go down to 1 prize, and I could just retreat into VMAX, and that would be the game. So yeah, that's Urshi Intel. That was the sort of better side of the draws, because it is a bit of a clunky deck at times. I think it's much better placed than it was in the last couple of weeks, so I do think it has a chance to see play this weekend. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.